All right, it's 2 minutes past 4 o'clock in the afternoon in Sofia, and 2 minutes past 3 o'clock in Amsterdam, where I am in the office. As it is being announced on the screen, I'm uh, I'm mentioned to be the Secretary General of the European Association for the Study of Gambling, which is true, to be honest. But at the very same time, I have to tell you that that's for, in any case, those who do not know me or do not know me yet. I'm in the responsible gambling business, as I always call it, for more than 35 years, starting in 1988 with Holland Casino setting up their responsible gambling program for the land-based casino industry. They were our first client, and in fact, they are still one of our clients, but we have uh, uh, got many more clients in a lot of different countries all over the world. Assisa is the company where we do a lot of training in different languages, uh, e-learnings, face-to-face, etc., but also advice and consultancy activities for the industry and for regulators. Besides that, we run the national helpline in the Netherlands for people that might have problems with gambling. And as I mentioned already, I'm the Secretary General of the European Association for the Study of Gambling, which means that we, in fact, one of the bigger things that we do is organize a conference once every 2 years somewhere in Europe. In 2 years ago, that was in Oslo, in Norway, and this year it's going to be in Rome, Italy, between the 10th and the 13th of September this year. So anyone who is interested is very welcome to join us, because then you will meet a lot of people from the industry, a lot of regulators, very important academics from all over the world will join us as well, and people working in the treatment area. Besides that, we have G4, which stands for Global Gambling Guidance Group, and G4 is in fact dealing with accreditation and certification of the gambling and betting industry. And that is what my presentation to the greater part will focus on this afternoon, so to say. On behalf of G4, I'm the chairman of the board. So once again, thank you very much, EEGS, for inviting me and having me here for the next close to 1 hour, and especially thank you very much to Biliana, who sent me the email saying, if you want, we would very much like you to do this presentation, and here I am. So what I will do, and maybe I could have the first slide, please. What I will do is give you an overview, so to say, of things that we have to look at. So it's about the need for responsible gambling accreditation and certification for the gambling and betting industry in the widest sense of the word. So what are we talking about? Uh, as I said, I will give you a brief overview, but most of the time, and then if you show me the next slide, please, most of the time, um most of the time I start with this painting. I'm from the Netherlands. I'm based in Amsterdam, and we have a lot of famous painters in our country, like you probably know, Rembrandt van Rijn, Vermeer. But this one has been painted by Vincent van Gogh in the 80s of the previous century, I should say, in around 8081. And these are people waiting in line to buy a lottery ticket in the National Lottery Ticket Office in The Hague. In those days, in 1880, etc., um, there were only four draws in a year. So you could buy a lottery ticket, and then you had to wait a very long time before you saw the result. So you could be patient, be impatient, but you had to wait in most cases for a while. If you look at what's happening nowadays, and if you look at how long one single game lasts when you play on a slot machine, so to say, the average speed of the game is around 3 seconds. In some countries, even a bit shorter, in some others, even a bit longer. But 3 seconds, every 3 seconds, a new game means you can play 1,200 games in 1 hour. And I mean, and that's a huge difference from what was possible, so to say, 140, 150 years ago, where you had only four draws in a year. That also means that you have to look at the approach of what do you do, because there is a difference between the speed of the game and the things that go with it. So even when I say 1,200 games, I always think, can it be faster? And of course, it can be faster. I mean, if you would have games that only take 1 or 2 seconds, if it's 1 second, you could even play 3,600 games in 1 hour. So, and then honestly, probably it leads to the fact that you have no idea anymore what you are doing. At the bottom of this painting, there's a quote. He's an American, Mencken is an American newspaperman, a journalist, and he said, for every complex problem, there's an easy answer, and it's wrong. And it's my favorite because usually people start to say, even before they know what the problem really looks like, oh, but if you would do this or if you would do that, then you would have solved your problem almost immediately. Well, this is not true, and that's why I like this quote. So if we can go to the next slide, on the next slide, you will see what are we talking about. So we talk about games of skill versus games of chance. Games of skill means you can influence the outcome of the game. In the game of chance, you cannot influence the outcome of the game, which also means that the risks of the games are different. Some games are more riskier than others, and definitely when there is skill involved, you can also influence the outcome of the game. Maybe it's when we look at problem gambling, responsible gambling, and especially problem gambling, maybe if we look at it in the way of that's an integrated mix of factors that are leading to the fact that you can develop a problem or not. Or maybe it has to do with your biological or genetic predisposition. I mean, maybe we are born with it. Maybe it's in our genes. And honestly, that's what they say about Asian countries and especially the Chinese people who play and gamble and bet enormously, and it looks like um, they are born with it. Let me put it this way. But it could also be in your biological constitution, so to say. Or maybe it has to do with psychology and definitely also the social environment. So the next slide, please. So we can also look at the nature of the activity itself. So which leads to problem gambling or to problem betting. What we will do is look at the terminology as well and look at responsible gambling or responsible betting strategies. What does that mean for the company, whether it's the operator, the supplier, or another company? And what does that mean on behalf of responsible gambling or ESG as it has been developed in the past couple of years as well? And then the next slide, please. Then the question is, do we need to broaden responsible gambling to ESG, which is dealing with the environment, social responsibility, and government? Or is there too much on the operator's plate already? I mean, that could be a separate presentation in itself, so to say. And that's the question. What you do see is that a number of the very big operators pay a lot of attention in their annual reports to the environment, social responsibility, and governance as well. But if we talk about responsible gambling and if we look at what D4 is trying to achieve. The focus is on problem gambling and responsible gambling. So the next slide, please. So if we look at ESG and what does it mean for the gambling and gambling industry, according to the American Gaming Association, then they say it has to do with the evolution of the traditional corporate social responsibility. ESG adds critical accountability through transparent measurement, monitoring, and reporting. So the gaming industry as stakeholders are looking at our industry performance and these issues and holding us accountable for the progress. And if you look at what AGA members do, they are prioritizing work on several key issues that are most material to the gaming business and important to our stakeholders. Next slide, please. Which means that the focus is on um, advancing sustainability, strengthening diversity, equity, and inclusion. These are topics that are being mentioned to an enormous amount as well these days, and investing in communities and responsible leadership. Well, these are all things of which I think they are very important, but from our point of view, if we look at the things that we would like to have developed, is that we focus on uh, problem gambling, responsible gambling, or safer gambling, or whatever you would like to call it, so to say. So, and honestly, I think that the EGA, the American Gaming Association, is also still in the very early stages, so to say, regarding the things that they are supposed to do. Can I have the next slide, please? So, when we talk about responsible gambling, safer gambling, we have to look at the definition. And then responsible gambling are all these policies and practices to prevent and reduce the harm of gambling and betting. To prevent and reduce the harm, which means, I mean, we are not only looking at abstinence, so to say, we are also looking at, in this case, controlled betting, controlled gambling, controlled behavior, so to say. And then responsible gambling or betting is about informed choice to play well designed games in a secure and supportive environment. And then maybe I should add, based on what we call a stepped care model. So a step care model means, in fact, for the players that you inform the player about his or her behavior based on a stepped care model, which means you give the information, or you only give the information to the customer that is necessary for the phase or the stage that he or she is in. So if you talk about a first time customer, from our point of view, there's no need to inform him saying, okay, I mean, very welcome here, but in case you develop a problem here, you already have the number of the national helpline, so to say. There's no need. Maybe you should just say when it's a first time customer, hope you have some fun or other equivalents, so to say. So informed choice, uh, steps care model, secure games in a supportive environment are the important issues, so to say. The next slide, please. So then, if you look at the responsible gambling and betting definition, and if you look at the four areas that we would like to focus on, for the operator, it means that the policies and practices to prevent and reduce the harm of gambling are there. So the operator is working with it. For the player, it means that they have an informed choice to play those games and that are being supported. For the regulator, which is also a very important stakeholder, it means ensuring compliance with the social responsibility provisions of the regulation. And for the game developer, who plays an active and a very important role. It means being responsible for an attractive game within the limits. The next slide, please. So what we did, and honestly, when we started the whole thing uh, 35 years ago, there were not a lot of people working in the area of problem gambling and responsible gambling. Nowadays, that has changed a lot, so to say. So, in those very early days, in fact, we were with four guys from different parts in the world. One of them was from the north of Europe, Sweden, Thomas Nielsen. There was one from Sydney, Australia, Paul Simon. There was one from what is now called Chemcare in the UK, Paul Bellringer, and myself. And we sat together and we thought, you know what we should do? We should set up a kind of ISO standard related to responsible gambling so that companies, operators, suppliers can show us that they do what they say they do. So our aim was in fact to minimize the impact of problem gambling and betting by promoting this worldwide accreditation program. So next slide, please. So if you look at, let's say, typical prevention, responsible gambling prevention tools, it has to do with limits, limit setting, time, money. It has to do with a clock that should be available so that people can realize what they are, how long they have been playing. It has to do with the take a break function, stop for a moment, and that could be self-exclusion, but it could also be using the panic button, so to say. We need to give them advice on how to play in a responsible manner. The accounts has to be monitored by the customer care team. It has to do with tests, self-assessment tests for gambling and betting problems. Self-exclusion is one of the other things. What do you do when underage play is taking place, and how can you prevent that? And the link to external sources of help. In fact, what we do, and that's what you do see a bit later on during this presentation as well, we have developed an audit checklist, which is updated every year, by the way. So every year in December, the board of G4, which is an international board with people from different backgrounds, is sitting together and have a look at what we would like to focus on more into detail for the next year. Honestly, G4 is not the only, let's say, accreditation and certification body. There are different organizations and different groups in different parts of the world, including WLA, the World Lottery Association, European Lotteries, but also the European Casino Association and the Responsible Gambling Council in Ontario, Canada, and some more who do this. But what we would like to do is we would like to be up to date and being a front runner related to what are necessary tools that we should use in trying to identify if operators and suppliers do a good job. The next slide, please. So who should be targeted? I mean, from a problem gambling point of view, I mean, if you have, in fact, we should look at the middle group, the low risk gamblers and the moderate risk gamblers. If you want to develop a policy, I mean, if there's no risk, then I mean, you of course you can have some general information that you would like your customers to be provided with. But I always say, if you look at the high risk gamblers, if you start to focus on them, then you're probably too late. Too late. So if we are looking at a real prevention policy, look at the low risk and the moderate risk group. Next slide, please. So at the end of the day, I mean, and that's what I always had to stop with in my presentations in the past, so to say, is that at the end of the day, I always said the individual player is responsible for his or her own behavior, and that's true. But there is more true. I mean, and that's what you see in a number of different countries nowadays. And that's where regulators have their say as well, making operators responsible or co-responsible for the behavior of the individual player. So in fact, there's a shared responsibility. And in some countries, if you don't do enough as an operator, the regulator is asking you to do it better. And in the worst case scenario, they give you a fine. And that's what you could see in countries like Sweden, the UK, and the Netherlands, and more, to be honest, as well nowadays. So it's not only the individual player who, at the end of the day, is responsible for his or her behavior, but it's the operator, the one who is providing the games as well. Next slide, please. So, in fact, you have four strategies to promote responsible gambling and responsible betting. It has to do with the environment of the project. In what way is it going to be promoted? It has to deal with the awareness through public education. So it's the public that needs to be informed in a more generic way, but also on an individual basis. It definitely has to do with the staff of the provider of the games, the operator, as well as the customers that should be informed and educated. And it has to do with the awareness using software tools. And that's what you do see. AI is coming up quite a bit nowadays. And if I listen to some operators, but also regulators to a certain extent, they say that AI is supposed to be the solution for a lot of problems that we have. At the very same time, I always say and think that AI is only part of the solution, can only be part of the solution. Um, and in fact, human communication, face-to-face communication between the, let's say, the customer support agent and the player is very important as well. The next slide, please. So it has to do with the company policy for responsible gambling and betting. So it has to do with where is the scope on, and it goes from the occasional overdrawn games to the development of pathological gambling addiction or gambling disorder, as we have to say nowadays. So what we would like to do is create an environment for gambling in a responsible manner, and that's all to the benefit of the customers, the staff, and the management of the company, so to say. Next slide, please. So if we get together, and I mean, what I've put here is a part of the audit checklist of last year. Honestly, the audit checklist of this year is ready as well, but it wasn't implemented yet. So what we do if we have a audit on responsible gambling, then we use the G4 audit checklist, which more into detail, if we take the topic of responsible code of practice, is look at the auditee has a strategy to encourage responsible gambling that demonstrates commitment, management communicates to staff, and you get a certain amount of points, and then we have to score besides that, and that leads to a certain percentage per group, so to say. If we go to the next slide, then the next slide, please. Yeah, thank you. Important issues regarding corporate standards, which is one of the topic, has to do with we only deal with licensed operators. It has to do with audit and inspections from the regulator, but also related to uh, uh, auditors and G4. It has to do with credit gambling, which is not allowed. It has to do with anti-money laundering activities when money laundering is trying to be created. Privacy is an important issue. We look at complaints and disputes, third-party complaints, but also all other kinds of complaints, and how are you dealing with disputes. Stakeholder engagement and research are important issues, and writing down all the policies that you are using is one of the other things. So if we go to the next slide, please, then you see that there's an operational code of practice which pays attention to age verification in the light of know your customer. It depends a bit on how these things are being organized. In some countries, there's a very detailed developed age verification system using social physical numbers uh, or others. In other countries, there's a limited possibility in using those systems, but at the end of the day, it means that operators have to show us, and they could be land-based or online, because we do both, has to show us how they are dealing with their age verification and know your customer system. So it has to do with social responsibility, player protection information, advertising, marketing, very important nowadays. Bonuses and cashbacks, because advertising marketing in a lot of countries, there's a limited possibility of using advertising these days. Marketing is not allowed in a number of countries as well. It has to do with bonuses or cashbacks or other incentive systems. Risk assessment. And are there risk assessments being carried out on the games that are being offered? And if so, and I will pay attention to that a little bit later on in this presentation. Um, Risk assessments means that some games are more riskier than others. Not to forbid them, but if you are dealing with them, you have to take special measures. Gambling for fun or for free should have the same features as the ones for real money, the player account, and do companies have a special VIP policy? Next slide, please. So training is important. Um, Training curriculum has to be up to date. I mean, of course, you have your generic responsible gambling information for all the employees, more detailed training and special sessions for those who are involved in customer support and marketing and management as well. Next slide, please. So, questions, basic questions are: when was the last training? What level of employees? Is all staff trained, as we want a minimum of 80%? And can you show us the evidence of proof of participation, so to say? Next slide, please. So, player protection tools, reality checks, informed choice, session deposit limits, breakouts for a moment, and self-exclusion, or maybe even exclusion of specific products. And how do you identify possible problem gambling behavior, so to say? Next slide, please. So it's about staff and responsible gambling. So how are you dealing with that, and how can you stay in control, and how can you um, uh, keep your customers in control, so to say? Uh, and in fact, it also has to do with staff and problem gambling, because there's one thing that we know, and that is that if you are working for an online or a land-based operator who is offering gambling opportunities or betting opportunities, in fact, you belong to a higher risk group. There are researchers who say that uh, around 10% of all those who are working in the industry have a problem with gambling themselves as well. So, in fact, what we do ask as the operators or the suppliers or everyone who is involved in this industry to set up a staff and problem gambling program, so that you don't fire your staff immediately, but give them the possibility to get rid of their problems, so to say. And this all should be put in what we call a player protection framework. So to to get a bit more into detail, I would like to show you one of the possibilities to do risk assessment. So if we go to the next slide, then we look at what is called the Asterisk methodology. Gamcard is one of the other instruments that is being used quite a bit. It's all started with the lottery operators, so to say, and it was developed by Mark Griffith and Richard Wood a while ago already. Franz Peere, who is a German researcher, has developed this Asterisk methodology, and there are more researchers and more regulators, excuse me, more regulators nowadays who are asking for the evidence if and about the risk potential of the games that are being offered. Uh, it looks like Asterix is a bit old-fashioned. It was validated in those early days by important researchers like Alex Buczynski and Jeffrey Derefensky and a lot more. But it has been a bit silent. So if I look at things that we should do in the near future, so to say, is that we should have a look at maybe other ways of trying to measure the risk assessment of the games. Anyway, there are a number of topics that are important regarding Austria. So if I can have the next slide, please. Then it has to do with the event frequency. And honestly, that's what I told you in the beginning. If you play a slot machine, which where every game lasts 3 seconds, then you could go to the right in this screen, saying, okay, this 5 seconds or less, then you score, and then you have the higher score. If you have to wait 6 days or more before the draw is there, then it's not a an important issue regarding the time between the stake, the gambling result, and the next stake opportunity. The next slide, please. So then it has to do with the interval of the payback. Do you get your money in immediately after the notification or the actual receipt of the payment? Uh, if you get paid out almost immediately or within 5 seconds, higher score. If you had to wait 6 days or more, there's no way of scoring any points, so to say. The next one, please. Next slide. The jackpot is an important one. And maybe if you look at an extraordinary top prize, typically in the form of a large amount of money formed by the accumulation of the previous bet. I mean, here it says uh, $1 million or more. Honestly, and I don't know if you have seen anything related to the Powerball lottery, which is a very important lottery in the USA. Um, I think the jackpot was close to 2 billion a couple of months ago, and I do remember that I think it was 3 or 4 years ago. The jackpot in the Powerball lottery was 1.4 billion, and at the end of the day, there were four people who did win this money. But then, honestly, the question always is: are people happy with it? I mean, I do remember the discussion with my national state lottery that had a jackpot of 40 million euros. And then I said, why don't we have 40 jackpots of 1 million euros? I mean, I think 1 million euros is still a lot of money. I don't know about you, but I think it's still a lot of money. But the thing is, if it's only 1 million, people don't buy lottery tickets. So they want to have a lesser chance to win the money. But if you win the money, it has to be bigger than whatever, so to say. Anyway, jackpot is an important issue. The next slide, please. So it has to do with the continuity of the player. Can you play continuously? I mean, and that's what you do see in a number of cases, land-based as well, but definitely online because it's always there. So uh, here it says if you play 3 hours of continuous gambling, the higher score. If you only play for a couple of minutes, it's very low. So, in fact, I always ask questions when I meet people working in this industry and saying, at what time are you starting to worry regarding the length of time that people have been playing? And honestly, it's very difficult to not only to measure it. That's what you could see if you play online in an easy way, but to develop to say now it's going to be a problem. But honestly, 3 hours or more. Um, we once did an audit in one of the two big Singapore casinos, and they are open 24 hours, 365 days a year, so to say. So they're always open. And I once had a check related to an audit and asked the manager in the slot machine area, said, when are you starting to worry if someone might have a problem with gambling? And then you know where he stopped? 72 hours. And I don't know if you know how long time that is, but that's 3 full days of 24 hours. And I think that's a bit too much. Next slide, please. Chance of winning a profit. If the chance is very less, the probability of realizing a profit with each game. If it's very small, it's less risky. If it's going to be higher, 25% or up, then you score the highest points, so to say. The next slide, please. I see there are some questions probably, but I will do those after the at the end of the presentation. The availability, gambling opportunities. I mean, if it's easy at home or at the workplace, higher score. If you have to travel a long while, then then availability hardly plays a role. I mean, maybe it's a bit like I used to say that gamblers are lazy by nature. If you make it too difficult, they don't do it. So if you make it easy, do it at home or in the workplace, then they will play more. Next slide, please. Multiple playing stake opportunities. Can you play more games at the same time? Can you put your money in different slot machines at the same time, or playing different online poker tables or screens at the same time? The more opportunities you have, the more you use them, the higher the score. Next slide, please. Variable stake amounts. If they are unlimited, then uh, then you score higher than when it's limited, and that's what you do see quite a bit nowadays when you see that regulators are trying to establish maximum amounts of money that are can be deposited or in any way are at stake, so to say. Next slide, please. So product design, and then you look at the game developer. I mean, how attractive do you make a game with audit or visual effects, so to say, so that you try to lead the potential player to play in the game. And honestly, I think game developers play a very important role in developing games. And I've talked quite a bit to game developers related to the audit that we have been carried out as well in the past. But usually they don't say a lot about um, um, how and why they can make these games attractive, so to say. Honestly, I think they are. Maybe I should say. Maybe I should say the best psychologists. They know what the player wants. Next slide, please. So, and then we also have to look at, let's say, the near wins when a gambler supposes to almost win or to miss the profit narrowly, a near win. If you have those, you get the higher score as well. So the next slide. So if you look at the methodology, the overall risk potential of a gambling product is obtained by multiplying of all these different dimensions that I've just show you and explained a little bit. So we have to weigh those dimensions, which could be theoretically from 1 to 10, but they are fixed by the expert currently between 4 and 8. So the higher the score, the more problematic the game could be. The next slide, please. So if you put that in a scoring document and look at the risk potential criteria, and if you look at the way they are being weighed, on the different scales. Next slide, please. then you see that the result is depending on the points that you score. If the risk assessment in the case of risk category A is the lowest, up to the highest in risk category of E. Honestly, most of the slot machines definitely belong to E. In any case, to the D category, so to say. The next one, please. So this is a way that you could show the global validation of Astrid in a way of that all these different aspects are being put in a spider web or in a different way of with a bar chart showing what are important issues and what causes most problems. So, if you put on the next slide, then I just check the question and answers, so to say. Uh, I have one. Maybe I should say Nikola Nenkov has one. How do you see responsible gambling development in countries like Germany and the UK? Well, if you look at the UK in the old days was the most liberal country that you could find and look at. So that means that in general, um, uh, the player had to take care of himself, so to say. Um, at the very same time, if you look at Germany, Germany is a much more restrictive company. If you look at all the developments related to slot machine arcades that you find in Germany, where people have to use a player card in all cases nowadays, where it's a limited amount of machines being available. So if you look at the differences, then in Germany there's a very strict regime. In the UK, there's still a rather liberal machine, though at the very same time, and that's what you can see if you look at the UK gambling board as well, that they are thinking of implementing and restricting certain measures. That's what you could see with the £1 and the FOBTs in the past. Good practices. It depends on what do you mean with good practices. Also from Nicola, in a way of paying attention and trying to get people in control. Um, uh, where they pay a lot of attention to people that are developing gambling problems and have a proactive approach. That's what you can see in countries like Norway, Sweden, and Finland in different ways because Norway has no casinos and a very restricted, mainly online gambling market. Sweden has both, though they are closing the land-based casinos probably rather soon. Uh, Finland has also limited possibilities regarding land-based casino facilities, but in all cases, the paying attention to the individual customer is very important, and they are very much in favor of a proactive approach, so to say. Um, okay, I have one more of Christine Louise. Hello, I was wondering what are the key reasons behind the increasing importance of responsible gambling accreditation and certification in the. Well, honestly, it has to do with the responsibility, and maybe even to a certain extent with ESG, as you can see nowadays, because operators do realize that they have a responsibility towards themselves, uh, but also towards other stakeholders, so to say. So, in spite of the fact that you could be asked or maybe even ordered by the regulator to say this is what you need to do. Uh, but at the very same time, it has to do with your own responsibility. So we started with these things a number of years ago, and I do remember that when we started, um, I was in Malta. and there was the Dragonera Casino, that was owned in those early days by a French company, Accor Casinos. And when I had a meeting with the CEO, the guy said, Peter, what you say that we should do is what we do for a very long time already. But honestly, usually operators didn't do a lot related to responsible gambling, only when they were forced to do so. So now we gave them the opportunity to show us that they do what they say they do, and I think that is what it is. That is what it is about, so to say. I had another question. Can you discuss any notable case studies where accreditation has made significant positive impact on the overall reputation and success of a gambling company? I think if you look at companies like Kindred, in the Unibet in the old days, which was uh, Ill, so-called illegal in a lot of countries because of their Maltese license, but they were very much a front runner related to responsible gambling issues, and they did more, and they're not the only ones, by the way, and they did more than was done in a lot of other countries as well. If you look at, maybe I should even take it close to home, if you look at Holland Casino, the land-based casino operator in the Netherlands, state-owned, state-controlled, to be honest, 14 casinos, uh, but they have developed a very open-minded and open-hearted responsible gambling program, so to say, where there is definitely a shared responsibility. So a proactive. So you need to be proactive. And what I do see is that more and more companies are being more proactive than years ago. And these are not only casino land-based casino companies or online online operators, but also lotteries, so to say. And I think this is the way to go forward regarding the things that we are doing. Um, I have one other. In Bulgaria, there are casinos and gaming halls on every corner. Also, thousands of gaming websites. Is it the regulators' job to keep people safe? And why would companies choose to have working responsible gambling practices? When do you see is a matter of losing money? Uh, I am aware of what is happening in a number of countries where casinos and gaming halls are on every corner. So um, it has to do with the companies that really are interested in running a responsible business, so to say. And I think that's the first thing that has to be declared, um, so to say, in the regard to what. Uh, so you can learn from other countries, and I know that if you would say to a customer, if you are one of the operators in Bulgaria, saying, no, 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 I think you should leave our gaming hall or our casino because you have been spending too much, that there's no control and that they could go to your neighbor. Uh, this all is true. And that's the same for the question that comes from Romania, where it's the same situation, very little laws and regulation about casinos. So it's a first. It could be a first step, so to say. Um, but it is important to recognize for yourself that you are in a business that offers games and offers games that can cause risk. And if you want to be there and and deal with it without any issues or with just as earning money as quick as possible, then you should not even think of a accreditation and certification program. So you are asking something from operators and suppliers, who not only can afford to pay attention to it, but really see the true value of what is going on. I mean, and that's what you could also see in Austria as an example, where companies like Novomatic of Admiral, as part of the Novomatic company, pays a lot of attention to these things. That's probably the same for IGT as well, to a certain extent. IGT as the slot manufacturer, so to say, and offer games to especially lotteries. But also the German big company Gauselmann, nowadays Mercury Gaming. So we have very large operators and suppliers and very small ones, but it has to do with the fact um, that you really have to be responsible for those things that you are offering, so to say. So, in fact, if you look at it in a more generic way, it's not only the regulator who should set rules in a way of this is allowed and this is not allowed, because then you create an illegal market at the very same time as well. But it really has to do with the feeling that you feel responsible for the things that you are offering, which in fact means that we do have SD4 quite a number of customers, but at the very same time, there are still a lot of operators who are not using these standards as well. So specific criteria or standards are evaluated during the accreditation program. In fact, um, I mentioned quite a number of them, and if you would like to get more information, then it would be good to send me an email and asking these questions. I'm looking at the clock at the very same time, um, and I see that we only have 6 minutes to go. So maybe I should pay some more attention to some of the questions that are still there. In what way does responsible gaming accreditation contribute to building trust and credibility within the gambling market? Honestly, I think that's a question you should ask the operators and the suppliers that are using it. And they use it in a way of uh, that they offer a product that can cause risk, but they know how to deal with it. And that is important for those who would like to get certified, so to say. Um, um, how does the certification process adapt to evolving trends and challenges in the gambling industry, such as the rise of online platforms and new forms of gambling? Honestly, if we look at new forms of gambling, I don't know yet. But what I do see, if we look at certification, it's not only for the land-based casinos and slot machine arcades. It's in fact it started the whole thing with an online platform offering poker games, pokerroom.com, which was later bought by bwin about 15, maybe even a bit longer ago. So regarding responsible gambling, and I think that's the last question which is on my list. Do you think that developers must limit it? Auto game cash out time cannot insert tickets or money in free. Honestly, these are instruments that could help. And if you limit auto game in a way of don't allow it, so to say, that would definitely help. Um, because these are measures that are being implemented again a bit by regulators nowadays as well. I had a question in the beginning related to Germany. In the old days, a game would last in Germany for 20 seconds. Then it was limited or faster up to 3 seconds. I think in Germany they have gone back to a minimum of 5 seconds at this moment. And it would not surprise me if regulators would try to give you answers in these ways because they have no idea in general what really disturbs the individual player in regarding to the games that are being offered. And if you have a waiting period, putting in tickets or money again, these things help to a certain extent. But what is most important is that there should be communication between, let's say, those who are working for the operators relay to customer support and the players themselves, because without any communication between those, uh, there's there's no right answer, so to say. And so I think if we look at the developments, that we should focus more on uh, consumer customer interaction than we do so far. And honestly, AI can be of help in trying to find out or trying to look at tendencies, so to say. But at the very same time, it's the face-to-face communication that is very important as well. All right. So I think I went to most of the questions related to what I would like to mention. Just let me have a final check. I think I've done all the questions that are here. Um, I talked more than I wanted to be honest. But if you look at the contact info which you showed on the screen, and if you have any further questions, or if you are interested in learning more about what G4 Global Gambling Guidance Group is doing, please go to our website or send me an email, and you will definitely get an answer. And in any case, thank you very much for attending this session, and I hope to see you um, again at some stage, maybe at ICE next week if you are going there or have the opportunity, or any other occasion. Or maybe you can go to the conference in Rome. Go to the EEGS website if you are interested. Also, if you are interested to do a presentation, you can send in an abstract for that. And definitely, you have the possibility to meet when we have the EEGS conference at the end of November this year in Sofia again, if I'm allowed to come to Sofia, of course. Thank you very much, and I wish you all the best and all the luck for the future. Bye bye.